Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Grain Place Foundation Seminar Series. My name is Isaac Johnson, and today I will be coming to you with the second edition of this series. For those of you who might have missed it, the first episode of this series came out on March 31st, which included just a general introduction of who I am and what the series aims to do, as well as a look at the sustainability comparison from Reganold and Wachter in 2016. The link to that video is included here below, but is also posted on the Grain Place Foundation's YouTube channel. And for those of you who haven't, I encourage you to check it out. Now, for today's section, we will be starting to tackle this big question of why organic. Um, we'll be specifically looking at environmental and social benefits of organic agriculture and include a small discussion of the One Health concept. However, looking forward to May 5th, we will start to look at current issues in organic as well as the economics and production side, which will round out the four facets of the sustainability comparison. Now, as I mentioned before, this project could go one of two ways, one of which would be entirely recorded presentations, as has been the standard so far. However, there's also the potential still for live discussion sessions. That said, I do still need feedback on if anyone would be interested in attending these live sessions. And so here I will stop and include a picture of a QR code for the questionnaire. This is just a small survey which says if you'd be interested in coming to the discussion sessions, as well as what your availability for those would be. And the link will also be included in the description of this video as well. So now, moving on to the question of this whole series and the question of today, why organic? However, before we can really start to answer that question, I think it's worthwhile to look at what is organic. Now, a lot of people are probably vaguely familiar with what constitutes as organic farming. However, I just want to remind people that in organic farming, you use organic seeds. That's part of it. The entire idea of organic was to create a production system that utilized natural ecosystem services rather than an entire reliance on synthetic chemicals to maintain production levels. So included in that is the idea of crop rotation, which is necessitated by organic production. And in terms of livestock in organic systems must have access to the outdoors or pasture, as well as be fed organic feed. Now, on the flip side of that, looking at what is not organic, in terms of crops, the use of genetically modified organisms is not permitted by organic standards. The use of synthetic fertilizers is not allowed, as well as biosolids or sewage sludge. And in terms of livestock, as I just mentioned, continuous confinement is not allowed by organic standards, as well as the use of antibiotic treatment or growth hormones. And in order to be certified organic, there's a process that growers must go through. This includes the certification annually by one of 80 certifying agents, which can be either state and county government organizations, nonprofits, as well as for-profit businesses. And in the next edition of this series, we'll start to look a bit more at certification as well as I mentioned, economics and production. But I think this small discussion of exactly what is organic is important when we're talking about why organic. So I think this figure from Gamage, this paper from 2023, does a good idea of just graphically showing all these things I just talked about. So now, let us start to look at this loaded question, why organic? So in the first session, we looked at this paper from Reganold and Wachter, which was mainly used in order to talk about their sustainability comparison, looking at organic farming versus non-organic farming. And key areas of focus we'll be looking at today are the environmental impact and the social well-being influences of organic production. So with that said, let's start to look at the environmental impact of organic and non-organic agriculture. So starting with looking at some of the potential harms that can result of agricultural production and beginning with pests. Pests are a major problem in any production agricultural scenario, and the uncontrolled use of insecticides can disrupt the natural predator-prey cycle and disrupt natural food chains of these insect pests, as well as land clearing for agriculture decreases habitat and the biodiversity of natural predators, which forces an increased reliance on insecticides in order to maintain yields and still get a crop. Next, weeds. Weeds are clearly a problem when you're attempting to cultivate a certain crop for a market, and the uncontrolled use of herbicides and non-organic systems typically creates the pressure for herbicide resistance in weeds. This is a huge problem as herbicides are usually the last resort for growers who are attempting to disrupt weed growing cycles. However, since the 1980s, there's been this very sharp increase in the amount of herbicide resistance found in weeds. And as of 2021, there were 521 unique species cases documented globally, which cost growers billions of dollars. Similar to on the last slide, I want to highlight the use of the word uncontrolled here, as organic production, as I mentioned, requires the annual certification of crops, and that includes a detailed look at what pesticides are being used, as organic, has regulations on exactly what can be used, but also when that can be used. So there's a lot of checks and balances in these systems, and I think that's one of the biggest pros in terms of looking at why organic production. In addition to weeds and pests, I want to just fly through some of these other potential harms of agriculture, particularly non-organic agriculture. So we see things like soil salinization, which is really a big risk in the coastal regions with rising sea levels and climate change. But this can cause things such as inhibited seed germination, reduced growth, discoloration, waterlogging. Halophytic plants, these salt-loving plants can grow. Additionally, agricultural use can result through synthetic fertilizers and pesticides and heavy metal and nutrient leaching, which has been seen to be linked with skin cancer, liver damage, kidney damage. So these human effects that are coming out of agricultural use. Additionally, inorganic chemicals from effluent and runoff, as well as pesticides, they can contaminate drinking water, and there's these human and wildlife risks, as we've talked to, with the health of our ecosystems and human health as well. Additionally, sediment runoff is a huge issue, looking at things like erosion, runoff soil, that with our current tillage regimes in organic and in conventional agriculture, this is a huge risk, especially since majority of producers grow annual crops, and the tillage regimes stir up the soil, and topsoil loss is becoming a huge issue. It can also disrupt the environment in several ways, such as aquatic food webs through stirring up sediment in the water. It transports pesticides, bacteria, and can destroy, as we mentioned, fish spawning grounds and aquatic food webs, and reduce photosynthesis in water as well. And then lastly, the presence of CO2, N2O, and methane, these greenhouse gases. You can see there's a bunch of sources in these in the agricultural production sector, and the effect is global warming and climate change. I think CO2 has been the main focus of global warming. However, the warming potential of N2O, methane, and some of these other gases is also pretty significant as well. So now that we've looked at some of the potential harms of the agricultural sector in general, let's look at specifically the environmental impact of organic. And do that, I want to go back to this Reginald and Wachter paper that we brought up in first session, and look at what their analysis of organic was. And as we mentioned, they generally saw in organic systems that soil carbon levels were higher, there was better soil quality and less erosion, higher diversity of flora and fauna, as well as more landscape diversity and more diverse functional groups. As I mentioned in the first session, this paper is almost 10 years old at this point. So now I want to take a second to look at just some more recent research and see how these findings have held up over time. So to start off, this paper from Smith et al. In 2019 was a global meta-analysis of organic systems. And in general, as you can see in this figure on the right, they found higher richness and abundance in organic systems of flora and fauna, similarly to Reginald and Walker. Additionally, they found higher levels of soil organic carbon and carbon stocks. And additionally, you can see in this graph higher profits. You can also see there was lesser yield. So this is a pretty consistent theme that we've seen with organic production thus far. You can expect there to be higher soil organic carbon, biotic richness, as well as higher profits with less yield, all of those things. Similarly to Smith et al., this 2022 meta-analysis found that in organic production systems, there was 23% higher biodiversity on average, but this was correlated with equivalent decreases in yield, as we again saw in the Smith paper. Uh, but again, this was also context dependent. So for things like cereal crops, they found a negative compatibility index, which from their study was uh, the difference between the increase in biodiversity and the reduction in yield. So for this one, the reduction in yield was so great that it more than offset the increases in biodiversity from organic systems. But overall, on average, throughout all the different crops they examined, they found roughly a zero compatibility index, indicating that, like I said earlier, on average, the increase in biodiversity was equivalent to the decrease in yield in these systems. So now this is another global meta-analysis of 36 different studies from 2021. And this study from Cristal Ornelas, they found in organic systems that there was on average 18% higher soil organic carbon and 30% higher microbial biomass carbon. Um, However, the really interesting thing from this finding is that they compared three different organic treatments. So looking at organic amendments, things like manure, versus conservation tillage regimes and cover cropping. And as you can see here, organic amendment had the biggest increase on soil organic carbon with a 24% increase, whereas conservation tillage had markedly less increase in soil organic carbon. However, cover cropping, they didn't see any significant difference until 5 years of this treatment. So this is speaking to the fact that, I mean, in general, you can see that comparing organic to non-organic systems, they saw higher organic carbon in the soil. However, it wasn't equal based on the type of treatment that was being performed. Now I want to talk about this study from Sanders et al. It's very recent from 2025, and to date, it is the largest pairwise comparative analysis of its kind. So from 1990 to 2018, they examined hundreds of different studies looking directly comparing organic versus conventional agriculture. And through all of these, they found clear and distinct advantages in organic in terms of environmental protection and resource conservation, which in terms of the sustainability analysis that we've been talking about, uh, it seems like this is a pretty clear and definitive win for organic in this system. I mean, as we've seen here, on average, organic is much more well-rounded, but you can see from the blue in this diagram, organic does seem to be, from Reginald and Walker's analysis, out competing conventional. And this is upheld by this 2015 study from Sanders et al. So I just want to show some of the data from this study. So on the bottom, you can see green indicates that there were more public goods being provided by organic. The gray is similar, and the orange is fewer. And on average, we can look down the line at all of these different metrics, and quite clearly, for everything except animal welfare, there's distinct advantages for organic production. You can still see here quite clearly the green is outweighing the orange in this visual comparison. And as I mentioned, this is the largest comparative analysis of its kind. It's very recent. And so when we're talking about the sustainability comparison and looking at organic versus conventional, this is a very clear win of organic in this one facet. So now that we've discussed the environmental impacts of organic production, let's take a quick look at the social well-being impacts of organic production. I think it's quite clear in a lot of people's minds the direct link between the environment and the type of production system used, such as organic. However, the social well-being aspect is quite clearly linked as well, and it's something that hasn't received a lot of attention until now. Um, so we can look again at Regnald and Wachter and what they said about social well-being. From their analysis, they found that organic, on average, reduced worker exposure to chemicals, encouraged diversification in production, but they also mentioned that there was certainly more research needed to definitively make statements about the quality of life in organic production. That said, I want to look at some more recent research now to examine the effects of organic production on the social well-being. So, starting with this study from Ben Brook et al. In 2021, they found that on average, organic farms use pesticides less intensively, and also the pesticides used are mainly biopesticides, which have a non-toxic mode of action. So clearly, when we're thinking about the public good and social well-being, things like water contamination and runoff, it's not going to be as big of a problem with organic production systems. Still is a problem and something that people are working against. But when you're thinking about the potential harm and social well-being, clearly this is another benefit for organic production systems. Additionally, this 2017 study found that the residue on conventional fruits and vegetables was the main source of human pesticide exposure. And that's not to mention the workers in the field who are actually directly being exposed to these working conditions. Additionally, this review found that antibiotic use in conventional agriculture was a key driver of antibiotic resistance, which is becoming a greater and greater problem in our world today. Uh, and in addition to these two things, this study found modest compositional differences in food. Things like omega-3 fatty acids and the phenolic compound content of organic versus conventional foods. However, this has been a point of stress to not scare people from eating more fruits and vegetables for fear of not being able to afford organic foods. So largely nutritionally wise, organic and conventional will be relatively similar. However, there are these modest compositional differences. So here we can see another really interesting result from Tomar et al. In 2024. They looked at food production and organic farming in India, and a quote from this article is, organic farming has positively impacted the mental well-being of the farmers, and apart from it, physical health, food security, and financial security are the fringe benefits for native organic farmers. So here they're talking about physical, food security, financial health, as well as the mental well-being. And that leads into the last study on this issue from 2024, from David et al. It's a study that polled conventional and organic farmers, and conventional farmers had a much higher occurrence of anxiety, depression, and stress, whereas organic farmers reported higher job satisfaction, life satisfaction, and just overall well-being. So combining all of these things from the mental health side of things all the way to community social benefits, there are several studies that agree and further the conclusions drawn by Regnald and Wachter that there are significant benefits to organic production in terms of social well-being. Now, finally, to conclude the session, I want to take these environmental and social benefits and put them in the perspective of this One Health concept, which is a very interesting concept. And this quote here, One Health is defined as a unifying approach aiming to sustainably balance and optimize the health of people, animals, and the ecosystem. It recognizes that the health of humans, animals, both domestic and wild, plants, and the wider ecosystem are both interdependent and linked. So I think talking about the social environmental benefits of organic production systems, you might ask, well, why is it important? Well, clearly there are ecosystem services and things that humans benefit from natural ecosystems, as well as direct human health risks of our production systems and the choices we make there, as well as the impact of our food and our nutrition and all of this. And I think this One Health concept, as you can see in this diagram here, combining the human, the environmental, and the animal, and recognizing that they're all completely interdependent. One affects the other, which affects the other, all combined into this One Health approach is a really interesting way to approach these problems. So here I've listed out some of the key principles of this approach, which are equity, socio-political and multicultural parity, socio-ecological equilibrium, stewardship, transdisciplinarity, and multisectoral collaboration. And I really want to focus on this idea of transdisciplinarity. So this is the combination of different disciplines to really tackle this complex issue. As I've mentioned a few times, obviously, the production of food, as we've seen today, can have benefits or harms to society, to the environment, to humans themselves, to wildlife, to domestic animals, and all of these are very interrelated. So taking an approach that understands and appreciates everything from the biological, the social, the economic, all of these together, is the idea of One Health. And in addition to just combining these different viewpoints, including a combination of academic and non-academic personnel is a key principle and tenet of the One Health approach to make it truly holistic. Um, Obviously, this is a complex issue, and when we're talking about organic and non-organic, there's farmers who are involved. There's the farm workers. There's the owners. There's all of the intermediaries. All of these to the endpoints of sale, and all of these are interconnected as well as being interconnected with our ecosystems as well. And so I just want to point out this was a cool paper I found, which talked about the outcomes of this One Health European Union joint program. So it was established in 2020, and it included individuals from sectors of public health, animal health, and food safety. And ultimately, this program, as of 2024, had resulted in 24 joint research projects, 17 PhD projects, and a multi-country simulation exercise. So, taking that as an example, I think that utilizing this perspective and this framework to approach such a complex issue is really the best way when we're talking about things like the Grain Place and its involvement in TOP, the Transition to Organic Partnership Program. I think truly using a transdisciplinary approach and valuing these different perspectives of different people, different disciplines is a really good approach. And as we can see from this European Union example, it is worked out pretty well. Now, I just want to return one last time to this framework, the sustainability comparison that we're viewing this whole seminar series through. And today we looked at the social and environmental benefits of organic production. And next time we will be looking at the production and economic side of things. So again, this session will be on May 5th. And once more, I would love some feedback on if anyone is interested in pursuing this in a discussion format or if another video session is the preferred mode of delivery. Either way, this has been another edition of the Grain Place Seminar Series, and I will see you all next time.